each of us an opportunity to have some comments about our policy. I know in the fall when we went through this process, there was a lot of concern that we weren't doing it the right way. There's definitely, it seemed like an opportunity to improve things. So I'd like to give you all an opportunity to just speak your mind. Thought we could identify some of the things that we like, and not necessarily look at the exact words, but just the concepts. Then identify some opportunities that we could take into consideration to review the policy, to change it, to make it better, stronger, easier, whatever it is that we want. And then we can take those ideas offline and come back to a future board meeting to do a first reading with those concepts and wordsmith it then. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
So would anyone like to start with,
Oh,
yes, some comments?
the thing last fall when we had, I don't know if we had them go through the process or they did the process on their own. The thing with Biltmore Prep, and marketing aside, you know, I got tired of hearing marketing, was that December 2 years earlier, we overrode policy or BDAN policy or whatever we were supposed to say about policy. Suspended policy, thank you. You can tell us it's not my favorite topic. And changed their name to whatever we changed it. Traditional Academy, thank you. It's like I don't want to even think about it. And then when we actually asked for a 2-week hold on voting in what they wanted because we wanted, I mean, we got bombarded with ugliness. And yeah, we were gonna, I don't want to say we caved. We gave them what they asked for and they worked for by letting them rename a school. But yet when we suspended policy 2 years before to change the name for them, nobody thought a thing of it. So, yeah, when Papago was being finished, and it was a good time to change the name, everybody was so inundated, I can't talk, with what happened with Biltmore Preparatory Academy, that we were afraid to move. And everything was shut down, no matter what we wanted to rename Papago. And then when we talked to the lawyers and they gave us their ruling, and I won't talk about it because it was, we're not supposed to talk about what happened.
Executive.
In executive session, I was going to say what goes on at Fight Club stays. That we're the bottom line. But I felt like we backed down from anything after the 2 weeks of bombardment of legalese and long letters and threats to take their children out of the school, and it got really, really silly. So I think that the policy itself gives you a good idea of what we want when the public wants to come out and change a name. And, you know, they did the letter of the policy. But if something happened, like all of a sudden we decided that Pat Tillman doesn't have a school named after him, well, I'll be damned. We should be the first to have a Patrick Tillman elementary school. Then we should be able to do that. So I like the way the policy is. It does give an outline of what to do. But at the same time, the way we acted at that time really bothered me. And so I think we do need to discuss it. We do need to look over it and make sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed.
Mm-hmm.
That if somebody decides that Papago is finally too obnoxious for the district, then that committee could come and say, hey, da 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 da. Yet at the same time, we've done it before, we can suspend policy and rename a school if we feel that it's necessary. You know, and just because my half of the district isn't as vocal as the other half of the district, we don't know what families don't like the name, but they don't know about this. You know, so maybe as we work on the policy, we also put it in the communicator. I don't know how we can get it out, but we need to let the whole district know that this exists. You know, LCK used to be Lafayette when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden it was LCK, but I don't know what went on. I mean, Mackin is named after a former superintendent or
Right.
principal. He cut a bat out of my grandmother's hair when she
A
was
sitting
pregnant.
superintendent, Robin,
Pardon?
no offense.
What?
Sitting superintendent,
Who was?
Mackin.
Was
He
he
was
sitting
sitting.
when they named the school? All right. See, and we have precedents, a sitting superintendent.
Not to,
No, go ahead, I'm done.
okay. First of all, the policy states, if you read the first sentence,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Bogner pointed it out,
Mm-hmm.
we have the authority to do it right away, authority to name or
Mhm.
rename without going through any of this stuff.
I know, we can suspend
We don't have to
policy.
suspend policy, it is
We can
policy.
just do it.
The thing, and with this policy and the percentages and all this other good stuff, I think Matt was the one who talked to Dr. Boyle. It's ambiguous, that's why we had to go and get another opinion coming in, because it is, they did take, the people at Squaw Peak, or whatever you want to call it, did take policy and follow it to the letter, but it is ambiguous in some of its areas. And that should probably be cleaned up. Dr. Boyle probably can go into it deeper if she wants to, but this was made policy during Gateway or Excellencia naming, and it was made to stop somebody from having a school named after them, or
After their mother.
somebody.
Wasn't
It wasn't that we wanted to do it, they wanted to stop something.
Right.
And that's not a good way to do policy, to stop something or someone. You should do policy that you want for everything, and it should be equal across the board. And that's my 2 cents. And this,
No, I took it.
yeah, and this, so it's ambiguous. Yeah, you put it out in the communicator, if only one person is for it, does that mean 100% of the people coming back are for it, or the 100% of the community? That's a really bad scale, and we should probably make it a little easier across the board,
Mhm.
since the board now and future has the authority, hopefully whatever comes in the future, will think about things and not be swayed by public opinion only.
Mhm.
And will take grief if they feel it is not in the best interest of the district. Be able to take grief. I don't know if they can or not. When we changed the name of Squaw Peak to traditional school, there wasn't a boo-ha made about it. It was kind of like, I mean, it was kind of like, it was no big deal. I'm not saying it was slipped under the rug, but, okay, you can do this, and we want this, and this is the reason, and everything sounded logical, so we did it.
Yeah, it was a December meeting at Capitol School.
I mean, the difference
It was
too,
no
though,
big
at the
deal.
time was, there was the committee that was formed at Squaw Peak to engage the community to find out why no one wanted to send their kids to that school, so there wasn't a lot of interest in the school to begin with. And that was, it wasn't quantified and extensive in this manner, but what they had heard, at least what the recommendations were, we've done our research, we've reached out to the community, and this would help attract these people that were now dealing with. I'm just mentioning it was different circumstances. It wasn't necessarily the policy, it was just different circumstances.
Well, and the Biltmore Prep numbers keep going up, and the projections that we have been able to make for next year based on kindergarten roundup and other activities are positive. So that's encouraging, the name, you know,
Oh, we're
despite
just
the name. And then,
talking about the process, not
right,
being Biltmore Prep, because we wouldn't want to change the name of the school just to bring up attendance, would we?
no,
Okay. I'm just wondering.
but I'm just pointing out that,
Yeah,
you know, despite whatever happened, there
Yes, but marketing was a key word with those people.
is going up. And then I think the current policy, it is confusing, and I liked the ASBA policy. It was more broad and it respected the local authority and the government, or the governing board's ability to name facilities. I think that should be reconsidered as well.
So, I mean, I'd like to move us into a conversation about what we liked about our policy. And if you don't like anything about it, that's okay. But the reason why, so here's my 2 cents, right? We have a policy, and I think it's important because it says a statement about who we are as a board. And yes, we are not the board that adopted this policy, but if we entertain ideas of suspending policy or changing a policy, that makes a statement about who we are. So we had this already on the books, and so I'd like to make sure that we protect the things that we think are important so that the next time a governing board in Creighton wants to make a decision like this, they'll have to deal with public, which I think they should, about how they go about doing their business and respecting the policies that are on the book. Are they trying to make a quick fix, or are they trying to honor a tradition that was put in there for one reason or another and adopted by the majority of the board? So I think that, I mean, just looking at what ASBA recommended, I think it didn't do enough to say for this board, at least for my participation on the board, that we respect community input as we make decisions. And certainly, as a board, we can go about the process however we want. We could form a committee, we could do a number of things, but without putting it in writing, it sends a message that we might consider it, we might not. I don't think it actually sends the message that we want to send, which is we respect your input. So I don't want to create a new policy that is burdensome, ambiguous, and confusing, but I'd also like to create or revise the policy so that it reflects our values. And one of those in particular is we do value community input. And we did talk about very extensively that we want to have these neighborhood schools. And so to cut out that from the language in the policy, I think is not necessarily the best way to say who we are and to validate that we respect the community input. So I'll just say the things I kind of like in this, and then I definitely want to hear from all of you, but I like that there is a process where we want to get a diverse perspective. So we want community membership, we want student body, we want members at large, parents, principals, etc. I like those things. But what I don't like is that, like, how do we document 75%? What's the difference with the school community or the district community? Also, like, in terms of a committee, and I think that we started this process about 2 years ago when Suzanne was the president, but the committee should be commissioned by the board and serve at the discretion of the board and to make our jobs easier. So if we wanted to have a committee for naming purposes, it should be just like our other committees, which is an advisory committee. So if we have some members from Papago neighborhood who were interested in changing the school name and they address the board, what I'd like to see is something where the board forms the committee with this type of representation, and here's your charge, here's the goals of this committee, go and do the work and bring back your recommendations, and then we can do whatever we want with those recommendations, just like we do with VER and the other committees that we've commissioned in the last few years.
so you want to take the principal out and put in the school board instead of the principal? Because right now the principal has that option to have the committee?
It says the principal unit administrator shall name an ad hoc naming committee.
So you're taking it out of the principal's control and putting it in the board's control?
Yeah, I would suggest that it's the school board shall, or may. I think the language here is clear, like, I think the school board may form an advisory committee, for naming recommendations, and these are like, this would be the compensation, and, I don't know, I guess that's something I would start with.
What is ad hoc?
Yes.
Well, and just, you know, if there would be a board, created ad hoc committee, then they would have to follow all the rules of posting meetings with 24-hour notice.
Love it.
You know, they would have to follow every open meeting law,
And they should.
so.
So yes, if you're asking if that, I'm aware that that's what I would want, yes, I think to have the meetings, that's one of the problems we had is people didn't feel that the committee did business out in the open and they thought that there were things happening behind closed doors, especially when it came to tallying support. So I think for a committee to conduct their business in open with public notices, just like we do, would be appropriate.
But the committee would be various people, I think there's 7 listed, 8, whatever, members at large and all that. I think you're hindering making them following, you're putting handcuffs on them in a way to follow the meeting laws. I think it's up to the administrator, principal and administrator to at least publicize this type of meeting, and if, you know, the public wishes to come, but to make them follow open meeting laws totally, technically, that's kind of, yeah, it's kind of hindering them a little bit.
I've never led a school.
Okay.
I'm not sure, I agree, but I'd love to hear Dr. Boyle or Dr. Wagner's response on that.
What is the ad hoc action?
Temporary,
Just temporary?
yeah, it's a temporary committee.
I would say that, all I would say is that I think you wanna keep bias. I mean, part of the charges during the whole change to Biltmore Prep was that there were certain people within the committee that were biased, that had certain preset agendas about the school, its name, and that kind of thing. And I think you have to consider that the process be such that that bias be mitigated to whatever degree possible, so that it is a recommendation that comes back to the board that has considered all viewpoints. And I think going the advisory committee board or away, I think potentially helps with that. What you need to do is identify how that chair, who would chair that committee. That makes a big difference. So
Is having the
if
building,
you changed it to the governing board shall name an advisory committee to include, then you really need to identify how that chair, and maybe it would be with an appointed chair, I don't know, because I think that will make a big difference in terms of how it moves forward and keeping bias from coming in. Being able to mitigate that bias, you have to have somebody who chairs that, who can make sure that all viewpoints, perspectives are being gathered and heard and considered in the process.
On that too, with the community, I mean, there was, the numbers, documented level of school and community support, 75%, district-wide. One of the things, other than, even from that area, that we heard as a board, other than, we heard a bunch of things, but one of them was I didn't get a letter to, do support or not support, so I really didn't know about that.
Yeah.
But the other thing I heard was, okay, you live in the district, this is it. One name. That's your choice.
Yeah.
Like it or leave it.
And it
And,
was sold as give us input, but not this is your
right.
vote.
I don't know, in my job when we choose families and stuff, we have at least 3 to 4 families we choose from, and we don't have to choose any of them if we don't want to. We have the option if we feel it doesn't meet our kids' needs. So put in like, if they all are not good for the board, or the board doesn't like them, like whatever names, the board has the option of rejecting all of them.
Mhm.
Give at least 3, maybe 4 names. If you get above that, you get really confused. 3 is a good number. 3 options, not only to the board, but these are the 3 options the community wants.
Mhm.
The schools, the parents, all this other stuff. And let the board have the final decision.
Yeah.
And the decision can be, we don't
Then we
want
have to
any
think
of them.
about quantification,
Right.
quantifying.
And we don't want any of them, could be an option also, or none of the above, 1, 2, or
Okay.
3, or none of the above.
Well, I like that because look, anytime we're considering changing a name, like it's a very emotional process, and this isn't something I want to spend too much time as a board member on, to be honest. So if we can eliminate or cut out some of that anxiety that gets built up, and over time it definitely creates a lot of pressure, I think that's better. And I think if we do open meeting type of thing and promote, these are the ways you can find out about it and give input, that would be good. And I like the idea of having the choices for the board to choose, so then.
Well, even the community too. Like if they put it out for 75% community, level of community and school support,
Hmm.
if they have 10 names, choose 3, and they take the top 3 names, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's more input from the community, and you don't have certain hidden agendas in naming and power trips, or whatever you want to call it, coming to the surface. If you have 5, 6 names that goes out of the community or more, you don't want to get 25, but some nice number to go out for community support,
Mm-hmm.
and pick top 3, somebody compiles the top 3, sends it to the board that way.
Okay.
One of the problems that this last name change really bothered me is that when we did tally everything, I felt like we were calling Faith a liar, because she was the one that tallied up all the responses from the district, and we basically didn't believe them. And that really bothered me. So somewhere in there, we need to re-clarify recommendations unless 75% of the documented level of school and community support. Well, in this district, we might not get any support from the rest of the schools areas
Right.
that we're changing a name. But in this case, the principal who we trust as the principal of that school was the one who tallied it, and we were basically saying, we don't believe you.
Well, so a couple things on that. Number one, I think that goes back to defining the chair. And is it appropriate and fair to have the principal of the school that's being changed be the chair? Because there's so much pressure. And I couldn't
Right in
feel
the middle of-
happy
Yeah.
or good for Faith at any
Yeah.
point during this process.
So
So
no one would.
what I'd love to do is just move that to someone more neutral from the district. And I'd also like to, I think it's important to build that school community, but as a board, we've worked hard to build the Creighton community. And I think that what we would do is just say, like, we want this community support from the Creighton district, and then just support versus opposition, not I didn't vote, so I mean, if only like we get 500 input votes or whatever, it's out of 500, not out of all the houses. And just like when you vote, you know, just like, yeah, sometimes you get 55% of the vote, but not everyone registered to vote votes. So I want to make sure we're looking at just the vote total, because I know that was another question that came up.
I wonder if that just requires then that within the policy that a statement be made to ensure the community is contacted.
Yeah.
So that there is a genuine effort to reach out to everybody for that input.
Are you talking about?
But if you take away the 75%
Right,
of the community, which is a very hard thing to come up with,
Yeah.
we can quantify 75% of staff. Quantifying 75% of the community is difficult to do. Or getting 75% of a community where some people choose not to engage. So if I'm just saying that if the standard goes to level of support without considering the
Numbers.
total community, you just have to make sure that the committee has made a reasonable attempt to reach out to the whole community.
Yeah.
So that everybody at least has had notification to,
Yeah.
an attempt to be part of give their input.
Yeah.
yeah, there should be no reason that the community doesn't know about this. I mean, because we not only have the communicator, even though it's not, doesn't come out monthly or anything like that, but I drive by 2 schools almost every day. And what catches my eyes are the billboards and coming by, the marquees. And if we have a school that has a committee thinking about the name change, it should be up on that school's marquee. The community should know just by passing by, walking their dogs, whatever. There should not be a reason the community does not know or was not contacted. You know, sometimes contacting phones, it's hard to do, email's hard to do, or you don't have everyone's email address or physical address if you don't want to spend the money on postage. But the marquee should do it also,
Yeah. So that's why we call it the good faith effort to
reasonable efforts.
reasonable, you know, however. And you also, so does, I know we don't vote, but I just wanted your feedback on, these committees are directed by the governing board. They don't just spring up in a vacuum out in the community and then here comes someone saying, we formed a committee, we followed your policy, here's your 3 recommendations. I want it to start with us and end with us.
But if it's really about community input, then why would it start with us? Would
'Cause
it
they-
start with the community?
Yeah, they would bring it to us with this idea and then the board would be responsive by forming the committee.
I just don't agree with this policy or even just tweaking it. And I think the ASBA policy is broad and simple enough to just avoid a lot of the issues that we've had in this district and so that we can focus on what we need to, which is student achievement. I feel like, I know some of you feel this way too, like we've wasted a lot of time on this issue because of various reasons. So I don't agree with this policy.
The thing, I agree with partly what she says. I'm not sure I agree with everything, but at least part I agree with. We've had in the past, students come at public comments. We cannot address public comments due to the open meeting laws, that's definite. And we've had some pretty good arguments come up in the past, whereas changing the name of a school. You know, and I've been sitting here and I'm thinking, yeah, that's a great idea, but nothing has been done. It depends on the president and the composition of the school board, that most of them in the past is, we got more important things to do, we're not gonna deal with that. They need to follow policy, but we don't tell them anything like that.
This should become a future agenda item where you take the information and looked at the ASBA policy on naming facilities. And as a team, you determine what it is that you want as far as naming facilities. If indeed you want the community to know about it, and if this is a committee of the board, it needs to be an advisory committee. And an advisory committee has to follow open meeting law, post meetings, so that
Right.
the community knows that the committee is meeting. And then from there, you've had some good ideas that you could determine and come to consensus to add at a future agenda. On a future agenda, and some things like, do you want the committee to submit 3 names? Or whatever, if you want it real general, then you can determine that and approve it when you handle that agenda. But perhaps you need to look at a couple more agendas, take a look at this, and then do it in, as an agenda item.
Dr. Boyle, I have one question. We're talking about making our policy for Creighton on renaming of the school or naming of the school if it's a brand new school. And if we make the policy and it's Creighton policy, if something is deemed illegal in what we say or something like that in the policy and we're sued, we're on the hook for that, correct?
The Arizona School Boards Association,
I'm
either,
talking about
yeah,
us, if it's a Creighton school policy only, we're on the hook for the lawyers. But if it's a Arizona School Board policy and something's illegal and we're sued, ASBA picks up the tab. Am I correct on that?
ASBA would support their policy.
Okay.
And I'm just going to give my thought on, if the Creighton Governing Board develops a policy and has any questions on that, you could send that to our legal and make sure that there's no legal issues on your policy. And that would be a simple thing, and it wouldn't be costly because we have legal information from the trust.
In addition, building off of what Dr. Boyle said, if the board could come to agreement on the components that it wanted in the policy, then we could work on putting together the actual wording of the policy as a draft. So the board didn't have to do that part
During a meeting.
during a meeting, and bring that back to the board to then make changes and refine as we're going along, so that the board doesn't have to go through that process of trying to actually write it in during the meeting. And so if the board could agree on the components like Dr. Boyle suggested, then we could work on writing up the draft.
And early on, when this became an issue at all, Hilda did some research and gathered policies from other districts, and you could certainly have those as part of a preliminary meeting on discussing the
Components.
verbiage of the components of the policy.
That would help actually move forward.
Okay, well, I've heard, I don't support anything about this. I heard, I've heard myself, of course. But, I think that there is some consensus. I mean, I think it's unanimous, and we don't need to vote on it or anything, because it's not an action item, but that what we have isn't good. And also that we don't want to spend a lot of time on this. So I think we should put this to rest by having it on a future agenda item, and or I mean, we don't even have to deal with this.
How about it, rather than a future agenda item per se, if something like a future agenda item information to bring 3 things you want in it,
Okay.
or 4 things you want. What are your priorities in the naming facilities? What are your 4 priorities, and list them, and have
Put a
those,
little work.
kind of put them together
Mhm.
and see what we're coming up with. In other words, the future agenda items is each board member bring 3 or 4 their priorities in this.
Uh-huh. Well, would it be a matter of, we're gonna hear this on May the 1st, and you can submit your 3 ideas by April 15th to Hilda?
We can do something like that, I guess, or just, yeah.
Okay. Then I'll,
I'm already writing it.
And I would say that May is not good.
well, I'm just,
Okay, no, just
Hypothetical.
because, you know, May is when we go out to the sites, you know, because we do the poetry recognition, and we do the retirement recognition,
Yeah.
and all of that stuff.
In other words, rather than trying to hammer it out
Or
during
June, I mean, that's
a board meeting,
yeah,
rather than hammering it out, the administration, if they're gonna write something, at least get some idea of where we are together, like 3 out of 5 board members says this was their top priority,
okay,
and this was the second one that came in second. So we get an idea where everyone is and how to scope it around the most people agreeing on everything, you know. You might not agree with the top, but second and third one, you're all in favor for, that type of thing.
mhm,
So we get this consensus.
I like that. And I like that idea for ASBA priorities and things like that too. Okay. Is there any further discussion then on this issue today? Hilda, do we need to wait till 7 more minutes or
I don't
so?
think so, because future agenda items is more your thing, you know, for you guys to ask future agenda items, it's not really something that
Okay,